Okay. So I'm diving in real big on this. So I have a whole other series that I'm reading as well by Tamara Pierce. Been around a while. If you want to go listen to that, it's also on my channel. But I am Bree. I am here to read to you. So the book that I have decided that I'm going to start today is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Now, am I 1000% sure I'm not going to get, like, I don't know, copyrighted for this? I hope to God I don't. I don't know anything about that shit. However, I think that these books are important. I think it's important for people to hear them, and sometimes people just don't have the time or the money to pay for Audible. Not that I don't love Audible. I think it's a great thing. However, hearing it on YouTube for free, sorry, that was me, is, I think, could be pretty cool. Because who doesn't have YouTube? Anyway, so I've decided I'm going to read The Hunger Games. This is going to be in my voice, the way that I hear them in my head. If you have differing opinions, that's fine. Just comment down below. Anyway, this book has 27 chapters. It's 374 pages. So we're going to be at this a while. It's going to be a while. I'm going to try to read, I think, a couple of chapters at a time in this one. Because as far as I remember, I don't think that the chapters are all that long. And even if they are, I'll just, keep reading. It's fine. Anyway, so join me on this Sunday afternoon in October as I read. I might start another book as well, so keep looking for that. I was thinking about getting the book, maybe I haven't nailed down what book, but I was thinking about getting a more like Halloween-oriented book to read, but I'm not sure yet. That's for another time. Anyway, let's go. When I wake up, the other side of my bed is cold. My fingers stretch out, seeking Prim's warmth, but finding only the rough canvas cover of the mattress. She must have had bad dreams and climbed in with our mother. Of course she did. This is the day of the reaping. I prop myself up on one elbow. There's enough light in the bedroom to see them. My little sister Prim, curled up on her side, cocooned in my mother's body, their cheeks pressed together. In sleep, my mother looks younger, still worn, but not so beaten down. Prim's face is as fresh as a raindrop, as lovely as the primrose for which she's named. My mother was very beautiful once too, or so they tell me. Sitting at Prim's knees, guarding her, is the world's ugliest cat. Mashed in nose, half of one ear missing. Eyes the color of rotten squash. Prim named him Buttercup, insisting that his muddy yellow coat match the bright flower. He hates me, or at least distrusts me. Even though it was years ago, I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim brought him home. Scrawny kitten, belly full of worms, crawling with fleas. The last thing I needed was another mouth to feed. But Prim begged so hard, cried even, I had to let him stay. It turned out okay. My mother got rid of the vermin, and he's a born mouser, even catches the occasional rat. Sometimes when I clean a kill, I feed Buttercup the entrails. He stopped hissing at me. Entrails? No hissing. This is the closest we will ever come to love. I swing my legs off the bed and slide into my hunting boots, supple leather that is molded to my feet. I pull on trousers and a shirt, tuck my long, dark braid up into a cap, and grab my forage bag. On the table under a wooden bowl, to protect it from hungry rats and cats alike, sits a perfect little goat cheese wrapped in basil leaves. Prim's gift to me on reaping day. I put the cheese carefully in my pocket as I slip outside. Our part of District 12, nicknamed the Seam, is usually crawling with coal miners heading out to the morning shift at this hour. Men and women with hunched shoulders, swollen knuckles, many who have long since stopped trying to scrub the coal dust out of their broken nails, the lines of their faces sunken in. But today, the black cinder streets are empty. Shutters on the squat gray houses are closed. The reaping isn't until 2. May as well sleep in if you can. Our house is almost at the edge of the seam. I only have a few gates to reach the scruffy field called the meadow, separating the meadow from the woods. In fact, enclosing all of District 12 is a high chain-link fence topped with barbed wire loops. In theory, it's supposed to be electrified 24 hours a day as a deterrent to the predators that live in the woods. Packs of wild dogs, lone cougars, bears that used to threaten our streets. But since we're lucky to get 2 or 3 hours of electricity in the evenings, it's usually safe to touch. Even so, I always take a moment to listen carefully for the hum that means the fence is live. Right now, it's silent as a stone. Concealed by a clump of bushes, I flatten out on my belly and slide under a 2-foot stretch that's been loose for years. There are several other weak spots in the fence, but this one is so close to home, I almost always enter the woods here. As soon as I'm in the trees, I retrieve a bow and sheath of arrows from a hollow log. Electrified or not, the fence has been successful at keeping the flesh eaters out of District 12. Inside the woods, they roam freely, and there are added concerns like venomous snakes, rabid animals, and no real paths to follow. But there's also food if you know how to find it. My father knew, and he taught me some before he was blown to bits in a mine explosion. There was nothing even to bury. I was 11 then. 5 years later, I still wake up screaming for him to run. Even though trespassing in the woods is illegal, and poaching carries the severest of penalties, more people would risk it if they had weapons, but most are not bold enough to venture out with just a knife. My bow is a rarity, crafted by my father, along with a few others that I keep well hidden in the woods, carefully wrapped in waterproof covers. My father could have made good money selling them, but if the officials found out, he would have been publicly executed for inciting a rebellion. Most of the peacekeepers turn a blind eye to the few of us who hunt because they're hungry for fresh meat as anybody is. In fact, they're among our best customers. But the idea that someone might be arming the seam would never have been allowed. In fall, a few brave souls sneaked into the woods to harvest apples, but always inside of the meadow, always close enough to run back to the safety of District 12 if trouble arises. District 12, where you can starve to death in safety, I mutter. Then I glance quickly over my shoulder. Even here, in the middle of nowhere, you worry someone might overhear you. When I was younger, I scared my mother to death. The things I would blurt out about District 12, about the people who rule our country, Pan Am, from the far-off city called the capital. Eventually, I understood this would only lead us to more trouble, so I learned to hold my tongue and to run my features into an indifferent mask so that no one could ever read my thoughts. Do my work quietly in school, make only polite talk in the public market, discuss little more than trades in the hob, which is the black market where I make most of my money. Even at home, where I'm less pleasant, I avoid discussing tricky topics like the reaping or food shortages or the Hunger Games. Prim might begin to repeat my words, and then where would we be? In the woods waits the only person with whom I can be myself, Gale. I can feel the muscles in my face relax and my pace quickening as I climb the hill to our place. A rock ledge overlooking a valley. A thicket of berry bushes protects it from unwanted eyes. The sight of him waiting there brings on a smile. Gale says I never smile except in the woods. "Hey, Catnip," says Gale. My real name is Katniss, but when I first told him, I had barely whispered it, so he thought I said catnip. Then, when this crazy lynx started following me around the woods looking for handouts, it became his official nickname for me. I finally had to kill the lynx because he scared off game. I almost regretted it because he wasn't bad company, but I got a decent price for his pelt. Look what I shot! Gale holds up a loaf of bread with an arrow stuck in it, and I laughed. It's real bakery bread, not that flat, dense loaves we make from our grain rations. I take it in my hands, pull out the arrow, and hold the puncture in the crust to my nose, inhaling the fragrance that makes my mouth flood with saliva. Fine bread like this is for special occasions. Still warm, I say. He must have been at the bakery at the crack of dawn to trade for this. What did it cost you? Just a squirrel. Think the old man was feeling sentimental this morning, says Gale. Even wished me luck. Well, we all feel a little closer today, don't we? I say, not even bothering to roll my eyes. Prim left us cheese. I pull it out. His expression brightens at the treat. Thank you, Prim. We'll have a real feast. Suddenly, he falls into a capital accent as he mimics Effie Trinket, the maniacally upbeat woman who arrives once a year to read out the names at the reaping. I almost forgot. Happy Hunger Games. He plucks a few blackberries from the bushes around us. And may the odds. He tosses a berry in a high arc toward me. I catch it in my mouth and break the delicate skin with my teeth. The sweet tartness explodes on my tongue. Be ever in your favor. I finish with equal verb. We have to joke about it because the alternative is to be scared out of your wits. Besides, the capital accent is so affected, almost anything sounds funny in it. I watch as Gale pulls out his knife and slices the bread. He could be my brother. Straight black hair, olive skin. We even have the same gray eyes. But we're not related, at least not closely. Most of the families who work the mines resemble one another this way. That's why my mother and Prim, with their light hair and blue eyes, always look out of place. They are. My mother's parents were part of the small merchant class that caters to officials, peacekeepers, and the occasional seam customer. They ran an apothecary shop in the nicer part of District 12. Since almost no one can afford doctors, apothecaries are our healers. My father got to know my mother because of his hunts. He would sometimes collect medicinal herbs and sell them to her shop to be brewed into remedies. She must have really loved him to leave her home for the seam. I try to remember that when all I can see is the woman who sat by, blank and unreachable, while her children turned to skin and bones. I try to forgive her for my father's sake, but to be honest, I'm not the forgiven type. Gale spreads the bread slices with the soft goat cheese, carefully placing a basil leaf on each, while I strip the bushes of their berries. We settle back in a nook in the rocks. From this place we are invisible, but have a clear view of the valley, which is teeming with summer life. Greens to gather, roots to dig, fish iridescent in the sunlight. The day is glorious, with a blue sky and soft breeze. The food's wonderful, with the cheese seeping into the warm bread and the berries bursting in our mouths. Everything would be perfect if this really was a holiday. If all the day off meant was roaming the mountains with Gale, hunting for tonight's supper. But instead, we have to be standing in the square at 2 o'clock, waiting for our names to be called out. We could do it, you know, Gale says quietly. What? I ask. Leave the district, run off, live in the woods, you and I. We could make it, says Gale. I don't know how to respond. The idea is so preposterous. If we didn't have so many kids, he adds quickly. They're not our kids, of course, but they might as well be. Gail's 2 little brothers and a sister, Prim, and you may as well know in our mothers too. May as well throw in our mothers too, because how would they live without us? Who would fill those mouths that are always asking for more? With both of us hunting daily, there are still nights when game has to be swapped for lard or shoelaces or wool. Still nights when we go to bed with our stomachs growling. I never want to have kids, I say. I might, if I didn't live here, says Gail. But you do, I say, irritated. Forget it, he snaps back. The conversation feels all wrong. Leave? How could I leave Prim, who's the only person in the world I'm certain I love? And Gail is devoted to his family. We can't leave. So why bother talking about it? And even if we did, where did this stuff about having kids come from? There's never been anything romantic between Gail and me. When we met, I was a skinny 12-year-old, and although he was only 2 years older, he already looked like a man. It took a long time for us to become friends, stop haggling over every trade, and begin helping each other out. Besides, if he wants kids, Gail won't have any trouble finding a wife. He's good looking. He's strong enough to handle the work in the mines, and he can hunt. You can tell by the way the girls whisper about him when he walks by in school that they want him. It makes me jealous, but not for the reason people would think. Good hunting partners are hard to find. What do you want to do? I ask. We can hunt, fish, or gather. Well, let's fish at the lake. We can leave our poles and gather in the woods. Get something nice for tonight, he says. Tonight, after the reaping, everyone is supposed to celebrate, and a lot of people do, out of relief that their children have been spared for another year. But at least 2 families will pull their shutters, lock their doors, and try to figure out how they will survive the painful weeks to come. We make out well. The predators ignore us on a day when easier, tastier prey abounds. By late morning, we have a dozen fish, a bag of greens, and best of all, a gallon of strawberries. I found the patch a few years ago, but Gail had the idea to string mesh nets around it to keep out the animals. On the way home, we swing by the Hob, the black market that operates in an abandoned warehouse that once held coal. When they came up with a more efficient system that transported the coal directly from the mines to the trains, the Hob gradually took over the space. Most businesses are closed by this time on reaping day, but the black market's still fairly busy. We easily trade 6 of the fish for good bread, the other 2 for salt. Greasy say, the bony old woman who sells bowls of hot soup from a large kettle, takes half the greens off our hands in exchange for a couple of chunks of paraffin. We might do a tad better elsewhere, but we make an effort to keep on good terms with Greasy Say. She's the only one who can consistently be counted on to buy wild hog. We don't hunt them on purpose, but if you're attacked and you take out a dog or 2, well, meat is meat. Once it's in the soup, I call it beef, Greasy Say would say with a wink. No one in the scene would turn up their noses at a good leg of wild dog, but the peacekeepers who come to the Hob can afford to be a little choosier. When we finish our business at the market, we go to the back door of the mayor's house to sell half the strawberries, knowing he has a particular fondness for them and can afford our price. The mayor's daughter, Madge, opens the door. She's in my year at school. Being the mayor's daughter, you'd expect her to be a snob, but she's alright. She just keeps to herself like me. Since neither of us really has a group of friends, we seem to end up together a lot at school, eating lunch, sitting next to each other at assemblies, partnering for sports activities. We rarely talk, which suits us both just fine. Today, her drab school outfit has been replaced by an expensive white dress. Her blonde hair is done up with a pink ribbon. Reaping clothes. Pretty dress, says Gale. Madge shoots him a look, trying to see if it's a genuine compliment or if he's just being ironic. It is a pretty dress, but she would never be wearing it ordinarily. She presses her lips together and then smiles. Well, if I end up going to the Capitol, I want to look nice, don't I? Now it's Gale's turn to be confused. Does she mean it, or is she messing with him? I'm guessing a second. You won't be going to the Capitol, says Gale coolly. His eyes land on a small circular pin that adorns her dress. Real gold. Beautifully crafted. It could keep a family in bread for months. What can you have? 5 entries? I had 6 when I was 12 years old. That's not her fault, I say. No, it's none's fault. Just the way it is, says Gale. Madge's face has become closed off. She puts the money for the berries in my hand. Good luck, Katniss. You too, I say, and the door closes. We walk towards the seam in silence. I don't like that Gale took a dig at Madge, but he's right, of course. The reaping system is unfair, with the poor getting the worst of it. You become eligible for the reaping the day you turn 12. That year, your name is entered once, at 13 twice, and so on until you reach the age of 18, the final year of eligibility. When your name goes into the pool 7 times, that's true for every citizen in the 12 districts in the entire country of Pan Am. But there's a catch. Say you are poor and starving as we were. You can opt to add your name more times in exchange for tesserae. Each tessera is worth a meager year's worth of supply of grain and oil for one person. You may do this for each of your family members as well. So at the age of 12, I had my name entered 4 times. Once, because I had to, and 3 times for tesserae for grain and oil for myself, Prim, and my mother. In fact, every year I have needed to do this, and the entries are cumulative. So now, at the age of 16, my name will be in the reaping 20 times. Gale, who is 18, has been either helping or single-handedly feeding a family of 5 for 7 years. Will have his name in 42 times. I can see why someone like Madge, who has never been at risk of needing tessera, can set him off. The chance of her name being drawn is very slim compared to those of us who live in the seam. Not impossible, but slim. And even though the rules are set up by the Capitol, not the districts, certainly not Madge's family, it's hard not to resent those who don't have to sign up for tesserae. Gale knows his anger at Madge is misdirected. On other days deep in the woods, I've listened to him rant about how the tesserae are just another tool to cause misery in our district. A way to plant hatred between the starving workers of the seam and those who can generally count on a supper and thereby ensure we will never trust one another. It's to the Capitol's advantage to have us divided amongst ourselves, he might say if there were no ears to hear but mine. If it wasn't reaping day, if a girl with a gold pin and no tesserae had not made what I'm sure she thought was a harmless comment. As we walk, I glance over at Gale's face, still smoldering underneath his stony expression. His rages seem pointless to me, although I never say so. It's not that I don't agree with him. I do. But what good is yelling about the Capitol in the middle of the woods? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make things fair. It doesn't fill our stomachs. In fact, it scares off the nearby game. I let him yell, though. Better he does it in the woods than in the district. Gale and I divide our spoils, leaving 2 fish, a couple of loaves of good bread, greens, a quart of strawberries, salt, paraffin, and a bit of money for each. See you in the square, I say. Wear something pretty, he says flatly. At home, I find my mother and my sister ready to go. My mother wears a fine dress from her apothecary days. Prim is in my first reaping outfit, a skirt and a ruffled blouse. It's a bit big on her, but my mother has made it stay with pins. Even so, she's having trouble keeping the blouse tucked in at the back. A tub of warm water awaits me. I scrub off the dirt and sweat from the woods and even wash my hair. To my surprise, my mother has laid out one of her own lovely dresses for me, a soft blue thing with matching shoes. Are you sure? I ask. I'm trying to get past rejecting offers of help from her. For a while, I was so angry I wouldn't allow her to do anything for me, and this is something special. Her clothes from her past are very precious to her. Of course. Let's put your hair up too, she says. I let her towel dry it and braid it up on my head. I can hardly recognize myself in the cracked mirror that leans against the wall. You look beautiful, says Prim in a hushed voice. And nothing like myself, I say. I hug her, because I know these next few hours will be terrible for her. Her first reaping. She's about as safe as you can get since she's only entered once. I wouldn't let her take out any tesserae. But she's worried about me, and the unthinkable might happen. I protect Prim in any way I can, but I'm powerless against the reaping. The anguish I always feel when she's in pain wells up in my chest and threatens to register on my face. I notice her blouse is pulled out of her skirt in the back again and force myself to stay calm. Tuck your tail in, little duck, I say, smoothing the blouse back in place. Prim giggles and gives me a small quack. Quack yourself, I say with a light laugh, the kind only Prim can draw out of me. Come on, let's eat, I say and plant a quick kiss on the top of her head. The fish and greens are already cooking in a stew, but that will be supper. We decided to save the strawberries and bakery bread for this evening's meal, to make it special, we say. Instead, we drink milk from Prim's goat, Lady, and eat the rough bread made from the tessera grain, although no one has much appetite anyway. At 1 o'clock, we head for the square. Attendance is mandatory unless you are on death's door. This evening, officials will come around and check to see if this is the case. If not, you'll be imprisoned. It's too bad, really, that they hold the reaping in the square, one of the few places in District 12 that can be pleasant. The square is surrounded by shops, and on public market days, especially if there's good weather, it has a holiday feel to it. But today, despite the bright banners hanging on the buildings, there's an air of grimness. The camera crews, perched like buzzards on rooftops, only add to the effect. People file in silently and sign in. The reaping is a good opportunity for the Capitol to keep tabs on the population as well. 12 through 18-year-olds are herded into the roped areas marked off by ages. The oldest in the front, the young ones like Prim towards the back. Family members line up around the perimeter, holding lightly to one another's hands. But there are others, too, who have no one they love at stake, or who no longer care, who slip among the crowd, taking bets on the 2 kids whose names will be drawn. Odds are given on their ages, whether they're seam or merchant, if they will break down and weep. Most refuse dealing with the racketeers, but carefully. These same people tend to be informers, and who hasn't broken the law. I could be shot on a daily basis for hunting, but the appetites of those in charge protect me. Not everyone can claim the same. Anyway, Gail and I agree that if we have to choose between dying of hunger and a bullet in the head, the bullet would be much quicker. The space gets tighter, more claustrophobic, as people arrive. The square is quite large, but not enough to hold District 12's population of about 8,000. Latecomers are directed to the adjacent streets, where they can watch the event on screens as it's televised live by the state. I find myself standing in a clump of 16s from the seam. We all exchange terse nods, then focus our attention on the temporary stage that is set up before the Justice buildings. It holds 3 chairs, a podium, and 2 large glass balls, one for the boys and one for the girls. I stare at the paper slips in the girls' ball. 20 of them have Katniss Everdeen written on them in careful handwriting. 2 of the 3 chairs fill with Madge's father, Mayor Undersea, who's a tall, balding man, and Effie Trinket, District 12's escort, fresh from the Capitol, with her scary white grin, pinkish hair, and spring green suit. They murmur to each other and then look with concern at the empty seat. Just as the town clock strikes 2, the mayor steps up to the podium and begins to read. It's the same story every year. He tells the history of Panem, the country that rose out of the ashes of the place that was once called North America. He lists the disasters, the droughts, the storms, the fires, the encroaching seas that swallowed up so much of the land, the brutal war for what little sustenance remained. The result was Panem, a shining capital ringed by 13 districts, which brought peace and prosperity to its citizens. Then came the dark days, the uprising of the districts against the capital. 12 were defeated, the 13th obliterated. The Treaty of Treason gave us new laws to guarantee peace, and as our yearly reminder that the dark days must never repeat, it gave us the Hunger Games. The rules of the Hunger Games were simple. In punishment for uprising, each of the 12 districts must provide 1 girl and 1 boy, called tributes, to participate. The 24 tributes will be imprisoned in a vast outdoor arena that can hold anything from a burning desert to a frozen wasteland. Over a period of several weeks, the competitors must fight to the death. The last tribute standing wins. Taking the kids from our districts, forcing them to kill one another while we watch. This is the Capitol's way of reminding us how totally we are at their mercy. How little chance we would stand of surviving another rebellion. Whatever words they use, the real message is clear. Look how we take your children and sacrifice them. There's nothing you can do. If you lift a finger, we will destroy every last one of you, just as we did in District 13. To make it humiliating as well as torturous, the Capitol requires us to treat the Hunger Games as a festivity, a sporting event pitting every district against the others. The last tribute alive receives a life at ease back home, and their district will be showered with prizes, largely consisting of food. All year, the Capitol will show the winning districts gifts of grain and oil, even delicacies like sugar, while the rest of us battle starvation. It is both a time for repentance and a time for thanks, intones the mayor. Then he reads the list of the past District 12 victors. In 24 years, we've had exactly 2. One is still alive, Hamish Abernathy, a paunchy, middle-aged man who at this moment appears hollering something unintelligible, staggers onto the stage, and falls into the third chair. He's drunk. Very. The crowd responds with its token applause, but he's confused and tries to give Effie Trinket a big hug, which she barely manages to fend off. The mayor looks distressed. Since all of this being televised right now, District 12 is the laughing stock of Panem, and he knows it. He quickly tries to pull the attention back to the reaping by introducing Effie Trinket. Bright and bubbly as ever, Effie Trinket trots to the podium and gives her signature. Happy Hunger Games! And may the odds be ever in your favor. Her pink hair must be a wig, because her curls have shifted slightly off center since her encounter with Hamish. She goes on a bit about what an honor it is to be here, although everyone knows she's just aching to get bumped up to a better district where they have proper victors, not drunks who molest you in front of the entire nation. Through the crowd, I spot Gale looking back at me with a ghost of a smile. As reapings go, this one at least has the slightest entertainment factor. But suddenly, I'm thinking of Gale and his 42 names in that big glass ball, and how the odds are not in his favor, not compared to a lot of the boys. And maybe he's thinking the same thing about me, because his face darkens and he turns away. But there are still thousands of slips. I wish I could whisper to him. It's time for the drawing. Effie Trinket says, as she always does, "Ladies first," and crosses to the glass ball with the girls' names. She reaches in, digs her hand deep into the ball, and pulls out a slip of paper. The crowd draws in a collective breath. Then you can hear a pin drop, and I'm feeling nauseous and so desperately hoping that it's not me, that it's not me, that it's not me. Effie Trinket crosses back to the podium, smooths the slip of paper, and reads out the name in a clear voice, and it's not me. It's Primrose Everdeen. Chapter 2. One time, when I was in a blind in a tree waiting motionless for game to wander by, I dozed off and fell 10 feet to the ground, landing on my back. It was as if the impact had knocked every wisp of air from my lungs, and I lay there struggling to inhale, to exhale, to do anything. That's how I feel now, trying to remember how to breathe, unable to speak, totally stunned as the name bounces around inside of my skull. Someone is gripping my arm, a boy from the seam, and I think maybe I started to fall and he caught me. There must have been some mistake. This can't be happening. Prim has one slip of paper in thousands. Her chances of being chosen so remote that I'd not even bothered to worry about her. Hadn't I done everything? Taken the tesserae, refused to let her do the same. One slip in thousands. The odds had been entirely in her favor. But it hadn't mattered. Somewhere, far away, I can hear the crowd murmuring unhappily, as they always do when a 12-year-old gets chosen, because no one thinks this is fair. And then I see her, the blood drained from her face, hands clenched in fists at her sides, walking with stiff, small steps toward the stage, passing me. And I see the back of her blouse has become untucked and hangs out over her skirt. It's this detail, the untucked blouse forming a ducktail, that brings me back to myself. Prim! The strangled cry comes out of my throat, and my muscles begin to move again. Prim! I don't need to shove through the crowd. The other kids make way immediately, allowing me to straight path to the stage. I reach her just as she's about to mount the steps. With one sweep of my arm, I push her behind me. I volunteer! I gasp. I volunteer as tribute! There's some confusion on the stage. District 12 hasn't had a volunteer in decades, and the protocol has become rusty. The rule is that once a tribute's name has been pulled from the ball, another eligible boy, if a boy's name has been read, or girl, if a girl's name has been read, can step forward to take his or her place. In some districts, in which winning the reaping is such a great honor, people are eager to risk their lives. The volunteering is complicated. But in District 12, where the word tribute is pretty much synonymous with the word corpse, volunteers are all but extinct. Lovely, says Effie Trinket, but I believe there's a small matter of introducing the reaping winner, and then asking for volunteers, and if no one comes forth, then we, She trails off, unsure of herself. What does it matter? says the mayor. He's looking at me with a pained expression on his face. He doesn't know me really, but there's a faint recognition there. I'm the girl who brings the strawberries. The girl his daughter might have spoken of on occasion. The girl who 5 years ago stood huddled with her mother and sister as he presented her, the oldest child, with a medal of valor. A medal for her father, vaporized in the mines. Does he remember that? What does it matter? He repeats gruffly. Let her come forward. Prim is screaming hysterically behind me. She wrapped her skinny arms around me like a vice. No, Katniss, no, you can't go. Prim, let go, I say harshly, because this is upsetting me and I don't want to cry. When they televise the replay of the reapings tonight, everyone will make note of my tears, and I'll be marked as an easy target. A weakling. I will give no one that satisfaction. Let go. I can feel someone pulling her from my back. I turn and see Gale has lifted Prim up off the ground, and she's thrashing up in his arms. Up you go, Catnip, he says in a voice he's fighting to keep steady. And then he carries Prim off towards my mother. I steel myself and climb the steps. Well, bravo, gushes Effie Trinket. That's the spirit of the games. She's pleased to finally have a district with a little action going on in it. What's your name? I swallow hard. Katniss Everdeen, I say. I bet my buttons that was your sister. Don't want her to steal all the glory, do we? Come on, everybody. Let's give a big round of applause to our newest tribute, trills Effie Trinket. To the everlasting credit of the people of District 12, not one person claps. Not even the ones holding betting slips. The ones who are usually beyond caring. Possibly because they know me from the Hob, or knew my father, or have encountered Prim, who no one can help loving. So instead of acknowledging applause, I stand there, unmoving, while they take part in the boldest form of dissent they can manage. Silence. Which says we do not agree. We do not condone. All of this is wrong. Then something unexpected happens. At least, I don't expect it, because I don't think of District 12 as a place that cares about me. But a shift has occurred since I stepped up to take Prim's place, and now it seems I have become someone precious. At first, then another, then almost every member of the crowd touches the 3 middle fingers of their left hands to their lips and hold it out to me. It's an old and rarely used gesture of our district, occasionally seen at funerals. It means thanks. It means admiration. It means goodbye to someone you love. Now I'm truly in danger of crying, but fortunately, Haymitch chooses this time to come staggering across the stage to congratulate me. Look at her, look at this one, he hollers, throwing an arm around my shoulders. He's surprisingly strong for such a wreck. I like her. His breath reeks of liquor, and it's been a long time since he's bathed. Lots of, he can't think of the word for a while. Spunk, he says triumphantly. More than you. He releases me and starts for the front of the stage. More than you, he shouts, pointing directly into a camera. Is he addressing the audience, or is he so drunk he might actually be taunting the Capitol? I'll never know, because just as he's opening his mouth to continue, Haymitch plummets off the stage and knocks himself unconscious. He's disgusting, but I'm grateful. With every camera gleefully trained on him, I have just enough time to release the small choked sound in my throat and compose myself. I put my hands behind my back and stare into the distance. I can see the hills I climbed this morning with Gale. For a moment, I yearned for something. The idea of us leaving the district, making our way in the woods. But I know I was right about running off, because who else would have volunteered for Prim? Haymitch is whisked away on a stretcher, and Effie Trinket is trying to get the ball rolling again. What an exciting day! She warbles as she attempts to straighten her wig, which has listed severely to the right. But more excitement to come. It's time to choose our boy tribute. Clearly hoping to contain her tenuous hair situation, she plants one hand on her head as she crosses to the ball that contains the boys' names and grabs the first slip she encounters. She zips back to the podium, and I don't even have time to wish for Gale's safety when she's reading the name. Peeta Mellark. Peeta Mellark? Oh no, I think. Not him, because I recognize this name, although I have never spoken directly to its owner, Peeta Mellark. No, the odds are not in my favor today. I watch as he makes his way toward the stage. Medium height, stocky build, ashy blonde hair that falls in waves over his forehead. The shock of the moment is registering on his face. You can see him struggle to remain emotionless, but his blue eyes show the alarm that I've seen so often in Prey. Yet he climbs steadily onto the stage and takes his place. Effie Trinket asks for volunteers, but no one steps forward. He has 2 older brothers, I know. I've seen them in the bakery, but one is probably too old now to volunteer, and the other won't. This is standard. Family devotion only goes so far for most people on Reaping Day. What I did was the radical thing. The mayor begins to read the long, dull treaty of treason, as he does every year at this point. It's required. But I'm not listening to a word. Why him, I think. Then I try to convince myself it doesn't matter. Peeta Mellark and I are not friends. Not even neighbors. We don't speak. Our only real interaction happened years ago. He's probably forgotten it. But I haven't. And I know I never will. It was during the worst time. My father had been killed in a mine accident 3 months earlier in the bitterest January anyone could remember. The numbness of his loss had passed, and the pain would hit me out of nowhere, doubling me over, racking my body with sobs. Where are you? I would cry out in my mind. Where have you gone? Of course, there was never any answer. The district had given us a small amount of money as compensation for his death. Enough to cover 1 month of grieving, at which time my mother would be expected to get a job, only she didn't. She didn't do anything but sit propped up in a chair, or more often, huddled under blankets on her bed, eyes fixed on some point in the distance. Once in a while she'd stir, get up as if moved by some urgent purpose, only to then collapse back into stillness. No amount of pleading from Prim seemed to affect her. I was terrified. I suppose now that my mother was locked in some dark world of sadness, but at the time, all I knew was that I had lost not only a father, but a mother as well. At 11 years old, with Prim only just 7, I took over as head of the family. There was no choice. I bought our food at the market and cooked it as best I could, tried to keep Prim and myself looking presentable, because if it had become known that my mother could no longer care for us, the district would have taken us away from her and placed us in the community home. I'd grown up seeing those kids at school. The sadness, marks of angry hands on their faces, the hopelessness that curled their shoulders forward. I could never let that happen to Prim. Sweet, tiny Prim who cried when I cried before she even knew the reason. Who brushed and plaited my mother's hair before we left for school. Who still polished my father's shaving mirror each night because he'd hated the layer of coal dust that settled on everything in the seam. The community home would crush her like a bug, so I kept our predicament a secret. But the money ran out, and we were slowly starving to death. There's no other way to put it. I kept telling myself if I could only hold out until May, just May 8th, I would turn 12 and be able to sign up for a tesserae and get that precious grain and oil to feed us. Only, there were still several weeks to go. We could well be dead by then. Starvation's not an uncommon fate in District 12. Who hasn't seen the victims? Older people who can't work, children from a family with too many to feed, those injured in the mines, straggling through the streets, and one day you come upon them sitting motionless against a wall or laying in the meadow. You hear the wails from a house and the peacekeepers are called in to retrieve the body. Starvation is never the cause of death officially. It's always the flu or exposure or pneumonia, but that fools no one. On the afternoon of my encounter with Peeta Mellark, the rain was falling in relentless icy sheets. I had been in town trying to trade some threadbare old baby clothes of Prim's in the public market, but there were no takers. Although I had been to the Hob on several occasions with my father, I was too frightened to venture into that rough, gritty place alone. The rain had soaked through my father's hunting jacket, leaving me chilled to the bone. For 3 days we had nothing but boiled water with some old dried mint leaves I'd found in the back of a cupboard. By the time the market closed, I was shaking so hard I'd dropped my bundle of baby clothes in a mud puddle. I didn't pick it up for fear I would keel over and be unable to regain my feet. Besides, no one wanted those clothes. I couldn't go home, because at home was my mother with her dead eyes and my little sister with her hollow cheeks and cracked lips. I couldn't walk into that room with the smoky fire from the damp branches I had scavenged at the edge of the woods after the coal had run out, my hands empty of any hope. I found myself stumbling along a muddy lane behind the shops that serve the wealthiest townspeople. The merchants live above their businesses, so I was essentially in their backyards. I remember the outlines of garden beds not yet planted for spring, a goat or two in a pen, one sodden dog tied to a post, hunched defeated in the muck. All forms of stealing are forbidden in District 12, punishable by death. But it crossed my mind there might be something in the trash bins. And those were fair game. Perhaps a bone at the butcher's or rotted vegetables at the grocer's. Something no one but my family was desperate enough to eat. Unfortunately, the bins had just been emptied. When I passed the baker's, the smell of fresh bread was so overwhelming I felt dizzy. The ovens were in the back, and a golden glow spilled out the open kitchen door. I stood mesmerized by the heat and the luscious scent until the rain interfered, running its icy fingers down my back, forcing me back to life. I lifted the lid to the baker's trash bin and found it spotlessly, heartlessly bare. Suddenly, a voice was screaming at me, and I looked up to see the baker's wife telling me to move on, and did I want her to call the peacekeepers, and how sick she was of having those brats from the seam pawing through her trash. The words were ugly, and I had no defense. As I carefully replaced the lid and backed away, I noticed him. A boy with blonde hair, peering out from behind his mother's back. I'd seen him at school. He was in my year, but I didn't know his name. He stuck with the town kids, so how would I? His mother went back into the bakery, grumbling, but he must have been watching me as I made my way behind the pen that held their pig and leaned against the far side of an apple tree. The realization that I'd have nothing to take home had finally sunk in. My knees buckled and I slid down the tree trunk to its roots. It was too much. I was too sick and weak and tired. Oh, so tired. Let them call the peacekeepers and take us to the community home, I thought. Or better yet, let me die right here in the rain. There was a clatter in the bakery, and I heard the woman screaming again and the sound of a blow. I vaguely wondered what was going on. Feet sloshed toward me in the mud, through the mud, and I thought, it's her. She's coming to drive me away with a stick. But it wasn't her. It was the boy. In his arms, he carried 2 large loaves of bread that must have fallen into the fire because the crusts were scorched black. His mother was yelling, "Feed it to the pig, you stupid creature. Why not? No one decent will buy burned bread." He began to tear off chunks from the burned parts and toss them into the trough, and the front bakery bell rung and his mother disappeared to help a customer. The boy never even glanced my way, but I was watching him. Because of the bread. Because of the red wheal that stood out on his cheek. What did she hit him with? My parents never hit us. I couldn't even imagine it. The boy took one look back to the bakery, as if checking that the coast was clear. Then, his attention back on the pig, he threw a loaf of bread in my direction. The second quickly followed, and he sloshed back to the bakery, closing the kitchen door tightly behind him. I stared at the loaves in disbelief. They were fine. Perfect, really, except for the burned areas. Did he mean for me to have them? He must have, because there they were, at my feet. Before anyone could witness what had happened, I shoved the loaves up under my shirt, wrapped the hunting jacket tightly around me, and walked swiftly away. The heat of the bread burned into my skin, but I clutched it tighter, clinging to life. By the time I reached home, the loaves had cooled somewhat, but the insides were still warm. When I dropped them on the table, Prim's hands reached to tear off a chunk, but I made her sit, forced my mother to join us at the table, and poured warm tea. I scraped off the black stuff and sliced the bread. We ate an entire loaf, slice by slice. It was good, hearty bread, filled with raisins and nuts. I put my clothes to dry at the fire, crawled into bed, and fell into a dreamless sleep. It didn't occur to me until the next morning that the boy might have burned the bread on purpose, might have dropped the loaves into the flames, knowing it meant being punished, and then delivered them to me. But I dismissed this. It must have been an accident. Why would he have done it? He didn't even know me. Still, just throw me the bread was an enormous kindness that would have surely resulted in a beating if discovered. I couldn't explain his actions. We ate slices of bread for breakfast and headed to school. It was as if spring had come overnight. Warm, sweet air, fluffy clouds. At school, I passed the boy in the hall. His cheek had swelled up, and his eye had blackened. He was with his friends and didn't acknowledge me in any way. But as I collected Prim and started for home that afternoon, I found him staring at me from across the schoolyard. Our eyes met for only a second, then he turned his head away. I dropped my gaze, embarrassed, and that's when I saw it. The first dandelion of the year. A bell went off in my head, and I thought of the hours spent in the woods with my father and knew how we were going to survive. To this day, I can never shake the connection between this boy, Peter Millark, and the bread that gave me hope, and the dandelion that reminded me that I was not doomed. And more than once, I have turned in the school hallway and caught his eyes trained on me, only to quickly flit away. I feel like I owed him something, and I hate owing people. Maybe if I had thanked him at some point, I'd be feeling less conflicted now. I thought about it a couple of times, but the opportunity never seemed to present itself, and now it never will. Because we were going to be thrown into an arena to fight to the death. Exactly how am I supposed to work in a thank you in there? Somehow, it just won't seem sincere if I'm trying to slit his throat. The mayor finishes the dreary treaty of treason and motions for Peeta and me to shake hands. His are as solid and warm as those loaves of bread. Peeta looks me right in the eye and gives my hand what I think is meant to be a reassuring squeeze. Maybe it's just a nervous spasm. We turn back to face the crowd as the anthem of Panem plays. Oh well, I think. There will be 24 of us. Odds are, someone will kill him before I do. Of course, the odds have not been very dependable of late. Okay. So, that was the first 2 chapters of The Hunger Games. I sincerely hope that you enjoy listening to it. Let me know down in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe and comment on my videos. Like, I'm trying to build something here. Not even for like monetary value, but just because I like doing this. This is fun for me. So don't ruin my fun. But anyway, obviously I've read the book before years ago. Really back when it was still kind of new. I've seen the movies a bunch of times. They did pretty good for what they were doing at the time. With the movies, I just felt like a lot of the substance is missing. And I'm sure there are other people out there that read these books aloud, and I'm sure it's better quality and they're better at it. But it's fun. It's something to do on a Sunday. So far, Katniss's life is pretty grim. It's a hard life, living on the seam. She, her mother's checked out. Her whole world collapsed when her husband died, which happens to people, and it shouldn't. I know it's sad losing loved ones, and that would be hard to get past. But when you've got kids, they have to be your focus. And that just never fell into place for her. Little Prim, she's so cute. Like, every description of her is adorable. Blonde and small and blue-eyed and just happy to be there, and everybody loves Prim and blah blah blah. In the movies, Gale was not always my favorite person. I don't think he's going to be my favorite person in the book either. Just because of how he acts towards Katniss. But Peeta in the movies was kind of always my favorite. So we'll see if he still holds up in the book. Because, like I said, I read this book when it was new, back in 2008. I was a whole 18 years old at the time. And I'm almost 36 now, so it's been 18 years, give or take. I can't do math. Let me see. No, yeah. About 18 years. So it'll be interesting to see as I'm reading what I can remember and what it's new information essentially for me, because I didn't remember it happening. But I'm excited for you to come on this journey with me. We'll see what other things Katniss has to get into and how she handles it. I think the portrayal of Haymitch in the books is far more authentic than it was in the movies. just because of the things that he went through. And I hear we might be getting a movie that is solely around Haymitch, so we'll see how it goes. Anyways.